What's up, BikeRumor fans? I'm Tyler, and this is my review of the Trek Supercaliber XC race bike. This rocket ship of a rig is the bike of choice for Trek's World Cup cross-country team, and there's no doubt as to why. This thing is super light. In this build, the 9.9, it comes in the very, very low 20-something pounds. And the secret of the bike is this 60mm travel IsoStrut rear shock that actually seems to punch way above its weight class in terms of what it's capable of doing, paired with a 100mm lightweight XC fork and a very, very stiff chassis. So let's jump into the woods and see how this thing rides, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the tech. Okay, real quick, let's cover a few of the key features that make this bike work. Up front, they have their knock block headset to keep the fork crown from smashing into the down tube in a wreck. The cockpit is ultra light with ESI foam grips and Bontrager's XXX carbon flat bar and stem. A twin lock lever controls the lockout for both the fork and the rear shock. The rear shock gives you external control over the rebound settings too, but you'll need to look under there to see what you're doing. Technically, the custom IsoStrut shock is only responsible for 55mm of the bike's 60mm of rear wheel travel. The thin seat stays flex to deliver the remaining 5mm and allow the design to work in the first place. The chainstays wrap around the C-tube, meaning the entire rear end is one single piece. This helps make it torsionally and laterally stiff, but here's a brain teaser. How do you think they get the front yoke and shock sleeve inside the front triangle? The down tube has a clear protective wrap and a cable tie port for internal cable management, topped off with rubber bumpers at the top. Alright, it's time to hit the trail, but stay tuned to see a full teardown of the IsoStrut shock. Make no mistake, this is a race bike. It's not what I'd call a fun bike, unless your idea of fun is crushing your competitor's hopes and dreams. With 720mm wide flat bars, it's almost like cheating when you're whipping through the woods. I could take straighter lines between tight trees, shaving off fractions of seconds all along the trail. In a race, that could make the difference between getting on the podium or not. They're also really low, putting you in a very aggressive racing position. The bike is impressively nimble and transforms every ounce of your power directly into forward motion. While this particular model costs almost 10 grand, you get the same frame across every price point in the Supercaliber family, which means no matter your budget, you'll get the stunningly sleek looks that are almost worth hanging in your living room when you're not riding it. But spring for the 9.9 model and you'll get a bike that's about 21.5 pounds. Going from a longer travel bike that's like 6 or 7 pounds heavier to this is like going from a monster truck to an F1 race car. Everything about it feels tight, fast, and lightweight. Fortunately, you can also add tough to that list of adjectives, because despite the feathery weight, it does feel like it can handle the abuses of World Cup racing. One note about this build, the tires are definitely meant for dry conditions only. They roll super fast on dry hardpack, and held up to a few fallen leaves before spring hit, but you'd want something more aggressive for damp terrain. We reviewed the Bontrager Covey XXX wheels that come on this bike, and they are wicked light and spool up super fast, which is great for powering out of corners and finish line sprints. As you can see, there's not a lot of movement out of the rear shock. The real goal here is improved traction and control, and it delivers that on both the descents and the climbs. But it's enough to take the edge off of small bumps. Basically, this is what you wish your hardtail was about 30 minutes into any race. The real question is, how does that IsoStrut shock work? Let's head into the lab and open it up. The IsoStrut shock is basically a carbon fiber sleeve wrapped around a Kashima coated stanchion, which is really only there for that carbon sleeve to slide on. Inside the stanchion is a fairly traditional rear shock. The stanchion doesn't move, it's bolted firmly in place on both ends. The bolt on the underside of the carbon sleeve is what pushes the shock to compress the air spring. To pull it apart for servicing, you'll want to release the air and disconnect the lockout cable. Then, unbolt the front and rear of the stanchion to disconnect the shock assembly from the frame. Removing that center bolt will disconnect the carbon sleeve from the stanchion, letting you slide the whole thing out. Pay attention to that little white square thing on the bolt. There's another one on the top you'll see in a second. Those are basically glide bushings that keep the carbon sleeve sliding in a straight line. Once you see it pulled apart, it's actually quite simple and quite clever. Fewer moving parts and a well-sealed system should mean less maintenance over time. That center bolt goes through the shock's lower eyelet, which is the part you'd normally see bolted onto your frame somewhere. It's visible through this slot. As that carbon sleeve slides forward, the bolt moves with it and compresses the shock. Simple, right? Keeping it all moving smoothly are two sponges soaked in fork oil, and they are the tricky part. I could not get them back into place without the stanchion pushing them right back out, so this bike went home in pieces. Sorry Trek, but seriously, thanks for letting me borrow this bike. It was rad. So the real question for any review is this: would I want to own this bike? If I were a cross-country racer, absolutely. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and you want to see more reviews and tech interviews and other killer stuff, hit that subscribe button and make sure to ring the little bell so you get notified when we launch something new here on BikeRumor's YouTube channel. Thanks a ton, and we'll see you next time.